"Ma'am, I'll need to see your boarding pass again," the flight attendant said, her tone clipped and dismissive. Her eyes narrowed as she scrutinized the ticket. "This needs to be confirmed before you can board. You cannot get on this plane yet. Please step aside." Elise held out her boarding pass once more. Her expression remained placid, a carefully constructed dam against the tide of indignation rising within her. "There is no mistake. I'm in seat 2A. Moments later, a security guard approached. When Elise tried to explain, his hand clamped onto her arm, his grip immediate and firm. His fingers dug into the fine wool of her simple suit jacket as he began to pull her from the gate. A ripple of attention passed through the other passengers. Some watched with concern, some with indifference, and a few with undisguised approval. To the onlookers, she was an anonymous woman causing a scene. They couldn't know they were witnessing an insult directed at Elise Washington, and insulting Elise Washington was a costly mistake. Her ascent to the pinnacle of American tech was a story written not in privilege, but in perseverance. Unlike the scions of Silicon Valley, Elise came from nothing. Her mother worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads in a neighborhood where dreams rarely survived the dawn. By 16, Elise was a prodigy born of necessity. While her peers were at the mall, she was reviving broken electronics from pawn shops, teaching herself to code on a second-hand computer her teacher had salvaged from a scrap heap. This wasn't a hobby, it was a lifeline. By 17, she was earning enough repairing computers for local businesses to help her mother with the rent. The path was never smooth. Despite perfect SAT scores, she was waitlisted at every top tech school. At Northwestern, a partial scholarship meant working 2 jobs around a full course load. The pattern held after graduation. At her first tech job, she watched white male colleagues with less experience climb the ladder above her. When she developed a scheduling algorithm that saved the company millions, her manager took the credit. When she protested, she was labeled difficult. But Elise didn't break. She built. Instead of fighting a system designed to exclude her, she created her own. At 28, she mortgaged her entire life to found Nexus Technologies. Her first office was the corner of her studio apartment. Her first employees, 3 classmates who traded salaries for a stake in her vision. 15 years later, Nexus Technologies was a global force with 5,000 employees and profits exceeding $1 billion. Elise Washington wasn't just a CEO, she was an architect of the future. That morning, in her penthouse overlooking Central Park, Elise was preparing for the most important deal of her career. She was packing for a trip to Singapore, where she would deliver the keynote address at the Global Tech Innovation Summit. That speech was poised to secure a $500 million investment from the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund, an investment that would launch Nexus Technologies' most ambitious project to date. Elise preferred to travel alone on long flights. It was her time to think, to strategize. For the 20-hour journey, she dressed for comfort and professionalism. Black trousers, a silk blouse, and a tailored blazer. Her only indulgence was a pair of handcrafted leather loafers. What she didn't know, as she headed for the airport, was that her path was about to cross with Bradley Winters, the CEO of Sky Globe Airlines, a man steering his family's legacy directly into a storm. Sky Globe had once been the jewel of American aviation. Founded in the golden age of air travel, its slogan, "The Sky's Elite," had once been an aspiration. Now, under Bradley Winters, it was a warning. At 68, Bradley was a third-generation executive who had inherited the CEO title as a birthright. With his perfectly coiffed silver hair and bespoke London suits, he looked the part. But the polish was only a veneer. When Elise's car arrived at LaGuardia's Terminal B, she tipped the driver generously and rolled her carry-on inside, completely unaware that her routine business trip was about to detonate. The frustration began at the premium check-in area, a serene enclave of plush carpets and minimal lines. Before she could approach the counter, a gate agent intercepted her. "Economy is that way, ma'am," the woman said, gesturing vaguely toward a sea of people. Elise paused, taking a steadying breath. "I'm flying first class to Singapore." She held up her digital boarding pass. The agent barely glanced at it. "Economy check-in," she repeated, her voice edged with impatience. Ignoring the dismissal, Elise walked to the premium counter, where another agent processed her check-in, but not without a flicker of surprise and a double check of her booking. Her next trial was at the premium security lane. As she approached, a TSA agent waved her out. Random security check, ma'am. You'll need enhanced screening. Elise watched as three white businessmen in expensive suits breezed through the premium lane, unbothered by the same agent. She glanced at the others pulled into the random screening line. Every one of them was a person of color. The pat-down was a calculated humiliation. The agent's hands were invasive, lingering with a professional-grade insolence that was impossible to prove but deeply felt. As she collected her belongings, she realized her watch was gone. It wasn't just any watch. It was a custom Patek Philippe worth over $60,000, a gift to herself when Nexus went public. It was a symbol of everything she had overcome. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "My watch is missing." The agent didn't look up. "If it was in the bin, it would have come through." "It was in the bin. I placed it there myself." What followed was 15 minutes of bureaucratic denial, with agents suggesting she'd left it at home. Only when she refused to move and threatened to call her attorney did a supervisor miraculously find it in a separate bin. By the time she reached Gate 37B, boarding was underway. A gate agent named Meredith eyed her with immediate suspicion. "Excuse me, this lane is for first-class passengers only." Elise presented her boarding pass again. "I'm aware. Seat 2A. Meredith took the pass, studying it as if it were a forgery. Frowning, she picked up a phone, speaking in hushed tones while shooting glances at Elise. A supervisor named Richard Bronson, a man with a permanent scowl, came over. "Is there a problem?" he asked, addressing Meredith, not Elise. "She says she has a first-class ticket," Meredith replied, emphasizing the word. Richard took the pass and gave Elise a slow, deliberate appraisal. "Ma'am, are you aware that these seats are quite expensive?" The question, laden with insinuation, hung in the air. A few passengers snickered. "We'll need to verify this," Richard announced. "There seems to be an irregularity." "What irregularity?" Elise asked, her voice even. "I'll need to see your passport, the credit card used for the purchase, and a company authorization for the expenditure." This was not protocol, this was harassment. Several passengers now had their phones out, recording. Elise produced her passport and the corporate card but drew the line at a company authorization letter, a document no airline required. "You'll have to step aside while we verify this," Richard insisted, dismissing her. While other first-class passengers boarded with a simple scan, Elise was escorted to a customer service desk. The promised few minutes stretched into an hour. From her seat, she watched the final boarding call, the gate door closing, the jet bridge pulling away. She could also see a huddle of Sky Globe employees laughing near the gate. Fragments of their conversation drifted over. "Thinks she belongs. Probably her first time on a plane." Through the vast terminal window, she watched her flight, the flight she had every right to be on, push back from the gate and taxi away. Only then did Richard return. "I regret to inform you your flight has departed," he said, his voice devoid of regret. "You missed your boarding time." "I missed my boarding time because your staff deliberately detained me," Elise stated, her voice like ice. Richard ignored the accusation. "We can rebook you on the next flight in 5 hours. I'm afraid first class is full, but we can offer you a seat in economy." It was the final, calculated insult. "Show me the booking system," Elise demanded. "I want to see the manifest for that flight." "I'm not authorized." "Show me the system," she repeated, standing. "Or I'll have my legal team pull every record you have." Rattled, Richard turned the monitor. Just as she suspected, there were 3 open seats in first class. "You're lying," she said simply. He quickly turned the screen away. "Those are blocked for operational reasons." "For discriminatory reasons," Elise corrected, her voice rising just enough to command the attention of those nearby. "You denied me boarding on my flight, and now you are lying to keep me out of first class on the next." That's when Richard signaled security. 2 guards approached, and one grabbed her arm with bruising force. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." "Take your hands off me," Elise said, her voice dangerously quiet. The guard tightened his grip, pulling her off balance, her phone and papers scattered across the floor. As she bent to retrieve them, she saw a familiar figure watching, with an air of detached satisfaction. It was Bradley Winters, the CEO of Sky Globe. As the guards led her away, she heard him mutter to a colleague, "Some people just don't know their place." It was at that exact moment that her phone began to ring. It was Marcus Chen, her chief strategy officer. This was not a call she could ignore. I need to take this, she told the guards, her tone leaving no room for argument. Stepping aside, she answered, her voice all business. Marcus, status report. What Bradley Winters couldn't possibly know was that this phone call was about to ground his airline. Permanently. Elise, the Singapore Sovereign Fund needs our decision by morning, Marcus said urgently. They need our recommended airline for the global corporate contract before they finalize the paperwork. This was the first revelation. Nexus Technologies was in the final stages of awarding a corporate travel contract worth $3.7 billion. It would grant one airline exclusive travel rights for a network of over 40 multinational corporations. SkyGlobe was on the short list. Her flight today was the final secret evaluation, a test they had just failed in the most spectacular way imaginable. I've seen enough, Elise said, her eyes fixed on Bradley Winters. Remove SkyGlobe from consideration. Draft the recommendation for Singapore Airlines. But Marcus wasn't finished. There's another issue. The market's nervous about our position in SkyGlobe. Rumors are swirling that we're divesting. The second bombshell. Through a private investment firm, Elise Washington and Nexus Technologies quietly controlled a 28% stake in SkyGlobe Airlines, the single largest ownership block, greater even than that of the Winters family. The woman they were manhandling held the power to shatter their stock price with a single sell order. The Singapore conference isn't just about the recommendation, Elise, Marcus continued. Wall Street is expecting your keynote to signal the green light for our acquisition talks. And there it was, the third and final revelation. The conference wasn't just about a $500 million investment. It was the public unveiling of a hostile takeover bid for a struggling American airline, an airline whose name was SkyGlobe. The meeting concerned the finalization of Nexus Technologies' acquisition of Aerosphere Airways, SkyGlobe's chief competitor in the Asian market. It was a move poised to reshape the airline industry for decades. The security guards shifted on their feet, a cold realization dawning that this situation was escalating far beyond their pay grade. One of them muttered into his radio, a clipped update on the disturbance at Terminal B. Elise's mind, however, operated with the chilling precision that had forged her legend in the tech world. In the space of 10 seconds, she had already architected a response, one that would deliver not only justice, but a masterclass in consequence. Marcus, she said into her phone, her voice steady, I need you to move now. Contact legal. Activate our voting shares and call for an emergency board meeting of SkyGlobe Airlines. Today, not tomorrow. Cite shareholder concern over discriminatory practices and potential civil rights violations. She paused, her gaze fixed on Bradley Winters, who was now locked in a heated exchange with Richard Bronson, the supervisor who had barred her from the flight. And Marcus, execute Plan Delta. Plan Delta was no mere dramatic flourish. It was a preemptive strategy designed years ago for this exact brand of crisis. A moment when bigotry threatened not just her dignity, but the very integrity of her business. Hanging up with Marcus, Elise immediately initiated a sequence of rapid-fire calls to her CFO, her general counsel, her head of PR. Each conversation was a surgical strike lasting less than 30 seconds, setting another gear of her counteroffensive into motion. The security guards still lingered, but their posture had shifted from authoritative to uncertain. One kept glancing at his radio, waiting for orders that weren't coming. The other stared openly at Elise, a flicker of recognition in his eyes as he struggled to place her face. Across the terminal, Bradley Winters jabbed a finger in her direction while speaking to an airport police officer. His agitated body language made his intentions clear. He wanted her gone. She's being disruptive and threatening my staff. Bradley's voice, amplified by frustration, carried across the polished floors. I want her escorted out of this terminal immediately. A small contingent of passengers, the same ones who had been filming, began to echo his demand. Get her out of here, a man in a golf shirt shouted. She's holding everyone up, a woman added, her voice sharp with impatience. Then came the inevitable, ugly crescendo. A red-faced man, emboldened by the mob mentality, bellowed the words, Go fly with your own kind. The raw racism poisoned the air, a shocking venom that made even some of the quietly judgmental onlookers flinch. A few people looked away, suddenly uncomfortable with the hatred now on full display. But as the airport police officer approached Elise, the script deviated. Instead of moving to remove her, he hesitated. His eyes widened. Ms. Washington? He asked, his voice low and respectful. Elise Washington? From Nexus Technologies? The officer, his name tag reading James Taylor, had seen her on the cover of Business Weekly just last month. "My daughter," he continued, keeping his voice down, "did a school report on you. She wants to be a software engineer. Because of you." That small, profound moment of being seen for who she was, not what they assumed her to be, steeled her resolve. Officer Taylor subtly shifted his position, creating a discreet barrier between Elise and the hostile passengers. It was a quiet choice, but a definitive one. And then, it began. Across the terminal, the massive departure boards flickered and died. The CNN broadcasts in the waiting areas went black. When they blinked back to life, it was not with airport news, but with a breaking financial bulletin. The chyron at the bottom of the screen told the story in stark red letters. Breaking, Sky Globe Airlines, SKG, shares plummet amid rumors of major shareholder sell-off. A ripple of awareness spread through the terminal. Travelers pointed at the screens, their murmurs growing louder. Phones emerged as people frantically checked investment apps. The personal drama at Gate 37B was instantly eclipsed by a looming financial catastrophe. On screen, analysts were already speculating, mentioning unconfirmed reports of a discriminatory incident that could expose the airline to catastrophic legal liability. Marcus Chen had executed Plan Delta flawlessly. Bradley Winter's phone began to shriek. He ignored it. It shrieked again and again. His face, once flushed with rage, drained of all color as he finally looked at the caller ID. He stepped away to answer, his entire demeanor collapsing from aggressive to defensive in an instant. He began to pace, his eyes darting toward Elise with a dawning, horrified comprehension. Whatever he was hearing was devastating. The panic was contagious. Other Sky Globe executives scattered throughout the airport received similar calls. The news spread through the staff in panicked whispers and wide-eyed glances. Just then, a new presence cut through the terminal's chaos. A group of men and women in immaculate business suits marched through the entrance with purpose. They were led by Samantha Rivera, Elise's executive assistant, a woman who moved with the predatory grace of a seasoned corporate warrior. Trailing her were four of Nexus Technologies' top lawyers, their expressions alone enough to curdle the blood of any opposing counsel. "The documents you requested," Samantha said, handing Elise a slim leather portfolio. "The board has been notified. They're assembling for a video conference in 30 minutes. Elise nodded, opening the portfolio. Inside were pristine copies of Sky Globe's own non-discrimination policies. With her team now assembled around her, she straightened her jacket and began to walk, not toward the exit, but back toward Gate 37B. Officer Taylor watched her go, making no move to intervene. The security guards exchanged helpless looks, with the airline's chain of command in freefall. Their radios remained silent. The crowd parted before her as she advanced, her legal team flanking her like an honor guard. A sea of smartphones rose to capture the moment, their owners sensing they were witnessing history, even if they didn't yet understand its scope. As she reached the gate, the terminal's public address system crackled to life. "Attention all passengers. Due to an administrative action, all Sky Globe Airlines flights are temporarily grounded. Please stand by for further information." The announcement echoed in Spanish, then Mandarin. Confusion morphed into outrage. Gate agents were swarmed by furious passengers demanding answers they didn't have. The airline's operations were frozen solid. Bradley Winters, still on his phone, looked up at the announcement, his face a mask of pure terror. The dots connected with brutal clarity. The woman, the insult, the catastrophe. Elise hadn't just been denied a seat, she had been denied her dignity. And Sky Globe Airlines was about to learn the price of that mistake. Gate 37B was no longer an airport gate, it was ground zero for the Sky Globe reckoning. The flight grounding ignited instant chaos. Hundreds of passengers mobbed the customer service desks, their voices a cacophony of demands. "What do you mean, grounded? I have a connection. This is outrageous. Someone better explain what's happening." The overwhelmed Sky Globe staff, desperate for a scapegoat, turned on Elise. "Ma'am, if you hadn't caused a disruption, none of this would be happening," yelled Meredith, the gate agent who had started it all. Richard Bronson, the supervisor, chimed in. "This woman refused to follow simple instructions and has disrupted our entire operation." Their tactic worked. The crowd's anger pivoted, focusing its full force on Elise. "Is she the reason our flights are canceled?" one man demanded, stepping toward her. Officer Taylor moved closer, his hand resting near his sidearm as the mood grew menacing. What happened next became one of the most viewed videos of the year. With unshakable calm, Elise stepped away from her lawyers, moved to an empty row of seats, and gracefully stood on a chair, elevating herself above the mob. "My name is Elise Washington," she began, her voice resonating with the same authority that commanded boardrooms and conference halls. "I am the CEO of Nexus Technologies and the founder of Horizon Capital." A wave of whispers and frantic phone searches rippled through the crowd. Eyes widened in disbelief. "I came to this airport today as a paying customer with a valid first-class ticket," she continued, her voice cutting through the noise. "I was denied boarding not for anything I did, but for what I look like. What happened to me is not unique. It happens to people who look like me every single day. The only difference is that today, it happened to someone with the power to demand accountability." At that moment, a breathless Bradley Winters arrived, having sprinted across the terminal. He froze, staring at the woman who now commanded the attention of everyone, attention he, as CEO, felt was his by right. An aide whispered urgently in his ear, and Bradley's expression shifted from anger to shock, then to raw fear. He finally understood. The first media crews arrived, tipped off to a major story breaking at the airport. Cameras and microphones pushed through the throng. "This is a private matter," Bradley snapped, trying to block them. "No media permitted." "This is a public terminal, sir," Officer Taylor interjected coolly. "They have every right to be here." The cameras immediately swiveled to capture the CEO's panicked, crumbling authority. Elise's voice rose, now amplified for a global audience. "Today, Sky Globe Airlines showed its true colors. What you may not know is that through my investment firm, I control 28% of this company's stock. That makes me its largest single shareholder." Gasps echoed through the terminal. The passengers who had been shouting at her moments before now shrank back, their faces paling. Bradley shoved his way through the crowd, his face a mask of forced cordiality. "Ms. Washington," he boomed for the cameras, "there has clearly been a terrible misunderstanding. On behalf of Sky Globe, I want to personally apologize." Elise looked down at him, her gaze unwavering. "This isn't about an inconvenience, Mr. Winters. This is about systemic discrimination embedded in your corporate culture, a culture you have personally fostered. I assure you we have strict, non-discrimination policies. Policies that exist only on paper," Elise cut him off. She turned to Samantha, who handed her a tablet. "For the past 6 months, my team has been documenting discriminatory incidents across your airline." The bombshell landed, silencing the terminal. Elise displayed a report detailing dozens of incidents, complete with dates, photos, and sworn testimony. "We sent mystery shoppers of different races, religions, and backgrounds on your flights, all with identical tickets. The disparities in their treatment aren't just disturbing, they're legally actionable." Bradley's face was now ashen. "Ms. Washington," he pleaded, lowering his voice. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately. I would be happy to offer you our corporate jet." "Today wasn't unfortunate, Mr. Winters. It was inevitable," Elise stated, her voice cold. "This is what happens when you tell your colleagues that some people don't know their place." Bradley's eyes widened, hearing his own toxic words thrown back at him. "You couldn't possibly have—" "I heard everything," she said, "and I have been listening to your passengers and your employees." As if on cue, a black woman in a business suit stepped forward. "I've been randomly selected for additional screening on every single Sky Globe flight I've taken for 15 years, she said, her voice trembling with long-suppressed anger. An elderly Asian man joined her. "They made me move seats last month because a white passenger wasn't comfortable sitting next to me." One by one, others stepped forward, their stories forming a damning chorus of systemic bias. The passengers who had hurled racist slurs earlier began to melt into the crowd, but it was too late. Their faces were already viral. When the testimonials finished, Elise addressed the world. "Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business. Sky Globe has been losing market share for 8 consecutive quarters because it refuses to see that the world has changed. Today, I was here to evaluate your airline for a potential $3 billion corporate travel contract. I was also considering a full acquisition." Bradley Winters looked as though he'd been physically struck. He had just personally torched the lifeline his dying company so desperately needed. Based on what I have experienced, Elise concluded, I cannot, in good conscience, do business with this company, not without a fundamental change in its leadership and its soul. Sky Globe. Reckoning was now trending worldwide. Just then, 3 members of Sky Globe's board of directors arrived, their faces etched with alarm. Ms. Washington, the lead director said, approaching her, we take these allegations with the utmost seriousness. We would like to convene an emergency meeting immediately. That's exactly what I called for an hour ago, Elise replied. The group moved toward a private lounge that had been hastily commandeered. As a visibly broken Bradley Winters trailed behind them, the cameras tracked his every defeated step. Inside the lounge, the board assembled, their faces grim on the large video screens. Elise's team presented their case with devastating precision, damning emails from Bradley, statistical proof of discriminatory patterns, testimony from former employees. As the evidence mounted, Bradley began to struggle for breath. He loosened his tie, sweat beading on his forehead. Halfway through the presentation, just as Elise detailed how his bigotry had cost the company 3 major corporate accounts, Bradley clutched his chest. I can't, he gasped before slumping sideways in his chair. Panic erupted. Is there a doctor? Someone shouted. Without hesitation, Elise was in command. Call an ambulance, she ordered a director before loosening Bradley's tie and carefully moving him into a recovery position on the floor. The image was staggering. The woman this man had tried to humiliate was now the one saving him. The paramedics arrived within minutes, diagnosing a severe panic attack, not a heart attack. Even as Bradley Winters finally faced the consequences of his actions, Elise Washington showed him the very humanity he had denied to so many others. As paramedics prepared to move him, Bradley Winters looked up at Elise, his expression a mask of pure disbelief. It was clear he couldn't comprehend why she, of all people, had intervened on his behalf. With Bradley en route to the hospital, the board meeting reconvened in an atmosphere thick with tension. Gone was the earlier arrogance. In its place sat the grim realization of the catastrophe they faced. They moved with a desperate swiftness born of survival. After less than 30 minutes, the chairman announced their verdict. With Elise's shares pulled, the airline was effectively crippled. Effective immediately, Bradley Winters would be suspended pending a full investigation. An interim CEO would be appointed from outside, a clear signal that the old guard had failed. Furthermore, the board unanimously approved an independent committee to root out the systemic discrimination and recommend sweeping reforms, requesting that Elise's team share all their documentation. As the meeting concluded, the chairman turned to Elise. Ms. Washington, he began, his voice heavy with contrition. We cannot undo the injustice you and countless others have suffered, but we can commit, here and now, to ensuring it never happens again. We would welcome your guidance in this transformation. Elise's reply was delivered with quiet force. Real change demands more than apologies and committees. It requires a tectonic shift in culture from the very top down. I will be watching. The world will be watching. When Elise and her team exited the lounge, they stepped into a transformed terminal. The palpable anger that had greeted her hours before had vanished, replaced by something entirely new: respect, admiration, and for many, a profound sense of gratitude. Passengers approached just to shake her hand. Airport staff, who had once averted their eyes, now gave nods of solidarity. The media, cameras flashing, sensed they were capturing not just a story, but a pivotal moment in the history of corporate America. The confrontation at Gate 37B was not an ending, but a beginning, a catalyst for a transformation that would ripple far beyond a single airline. But the most stunning developments were yet to come. 1 week later, the world witnessed an event unprecedented in aviation history. In a grand Manhattan ballroom, packed to the rafters with global press, the Sky Globe logo hung behind a podium, not as a symbol of prestige, but as a relic of a fallen empire. Dr. Janet Rivera, the interim board chair and the first Latina to ever hold such a position, approached the microphone. The room fell silent. After careful consideration and the preliminary findings of our internal audit, she announced, the board of directors has made the difficult but necessary decision to suspend all Sky Globe operations, effective immediately. A collective gasp swept through the room. The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. Never before had a major airline voluntarily grounded its entire fleet. Over 250 aircraft would sit idle. More than 21,000 employees would be placed on paid leave. The financial cost was staggering, an estimated $35 million per day. But as Dr. Rivera continued, she made it clear that the cost of doing nothing would have been infinitely greater. Many have questioned the necessity of such a drastic measure, Rivera began, her voice a beacon of resolve. The answer is simple. You cannot repair a rotted foundation. You must tear it down and rebuild. The problems at Sky Globe were not cosmetic, they were structural, woven into the very fabric of this company, from the boardroom to the baggage claim. Cameras panned across the solemn faces of the board members, men and women who now understood the true depth of their company's failings. In the days that followed, Sky Globe terminals became ghost towns. Ticketing counters stood empty, kiosks displaying error messages, maintenance hangars fell silent. At JFK, a time-lapse camera captured a haunting ballet of tow trucks moving the fleet to remote stands, their engines shrouded, their livery suddenly looking like artifacts from a bygone era. Sky Globe Airlines will remain on the ground, Dr. Rivera declared at the press conference, until we have implemented new leadership, new policies, and new cultural safeguards that guarantee every single passenger and employee is treated with dignity and respect. Perhaps the most unexpected development, however, came not from the boardroom, but from the front lines. A wave of profound remorse began to surface from the very employees who had upheld the discriminatory culture. In an emotional interview, Meredith Thompson, the gate agent who first denied Elise her seat, spoke through tears. I worked for Sky Globe for 10 years, she confessed, and I never once questioned the patterns I was part of. We were trained to apply extra scrutiny, but it was never called racial profiling. It was always cloaked in the language of security. Meredith had since volunteered for an employee committee, working to undo the very system she had helped maintain. I can't change what I did, she said, her voice breaking, but I can help make sure no one ever has to do it again. Meanwhile, at New York Presbyterian, Bradley Winters was recovering from what doctors called a stress-induced cardiovascular event. He watched the press conference from his hospital bed, his expression shifting from disbelief to a dawning, painful understanding. Sources close to him said he was uncharacteristically silent, refusing to defend his actions. One nurse overheard him whisper to himself, "She was right." 2 weeks later, the auditor's preliminary findings were released, and they were more damning than anyone imagined. The fallout was immediate. Fearing similar exposure, competing airlines scrambled to announce their own diversity initiatives. United launched a review of its service practices. Delta created an independent oversight committee. American mandated anti-bias training for all staff. Aviation analyst Maria Chen noted, "The Sky Globe incident has forced an unprecedented moment of self-examination across the entire industry." 3 months after the confrontation, the Department of Transportation announced new regulations requiring airlines to track and report data on passenger treatment. At LaGuardia, Gate 37B was under renovation. A sign wrapped in blue tarp teased, "Coming soon, a new way to fly." Behind it, a redesigned space was taking shape, complete with accessibility enhancements, prayer rooms, and multilingual signage. 6 months after grounding its fleet, Sky Globe Airlines returned to the skies. Its first flight, from New York to Singapore, was piloted by Captain Diane Rodriguez, the airline's first Latina chief pilot. The lead flight attendant was a man who had once sued the company for discrimination, but had returned under its new leadership. And Bradley Winters, who never returned to aviation, was reportedly volunteering with organizations that created economic opportunities for minority youth. A quiet epilogue to a career built on exclusion. The world of travel would never be the same, and it all began because one woman, in one moment, refused to be denied her place. If this story of defiance and transformation moved you, share it with others, and join us again as we explore the moments that change everything.